there probably is more coming out. Don't you think, Adam?
There could be, but we are now witnessing the post-cancellation, post-purity style of politics that the Republican Party has ushered in. I'm not going to sit here and defend things Graham Plattner did in his past. Not even Graham Plattner defends these things that he did in his past. But we have watched for a decade as Republicans have repeatedly lowered the threshold, lowered the standards for their candidates. And now Democrats are going to keep holding our candidates to an infinitely higher standard while we have Ken Paxton in Texas, while we have Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office right now. And I guess it remains to be seen. But I also want to
Adam Mockler went on Newsnight with Abby Phillip and absolutely shut down Caroline Sunshine on a range of topics. But the most important part of this conversation is the growing rift inside the Republican Party itself over the Iran war. We're talking about people who used to identify as MAGA, now saying enough is enough because this war doesn't match what Trump promised at his second inauguration. On top of that, there's a fascinating exchange about masculinity in politics and why Republicans keep trying to weaponize that word against Democrats while completely ignoring their own record. Let's get into this clip and I'll share my thoughts. At the end,
let me explain what non-MAGA is. It used to be in the Republican Party, you had two wings. You had the MAGA wing and then the non-MAGA wing, which was like the establishment Republicans that Trump had overtaken. So these were the neocons. These were people who were very supportive of the actions that the Trump administration is taking right now. Non-MAGA now means people who have left MAGA, who have left the MAGA movement because they don't feel like this war is fulfilling the promise that the president said at his second inaugural address, which is that we will not just be judged by the battles that we win and the wars that we end, but also perhaps by the wars that we never start. So I, too, am glad that our pilots are safe. I have a lot of questions about our KC-135s that went down for the first time in American combat. I have a lot of questions about our F-15 pilots who went down over Iran, who we've still never met. We've had the astronauts at the White House. We've never heard from our F-15 pilots. It's time for us to go home. We don't need to wait for a deal. The president can have a huge political rebound by just leaving. And by the way, it's also affecting not just how the Republican Party views President Trump, but how our country is viewed on the world stage. I was just in Istanbul, Turkey, which is a NATO ally that shares a border with Iran. And I just asked people, because I'm an American and I haven't talked to people abroad about how they view our country. And I said, does this war make you respect America more or less as a global force for good? And every single person I talked to sincerely said no. They said, you've killed 165 school children. This isn't bringing us closer to peace. This doesn't help us view America in a better light. And so it's time to go. It's time to come home.
It seems like they don't really have any idea how long this is going to take, in part because they have underestimated the timeline from the very beginning.
Yeah, Trump is definitely in over his head. This 4 to 6 week timeline is now over 100 days, and we've had all of the costs of this with none of the benefits. We've gotten zero political concessions on the nuclear question, on IRGC, on the regime change question. We have made no progress on that while spending over $100 billion. Americans are struggling with high gas prices, with the economy, and yet we are being lied to on TV by people who are saying this war is almost over. Every time we go to war with a country that starts with IRA, it ends up in a disaster where we make very little progress. We hit a grinding counterinsurgency, and now Iran seems to be waging asymmetric warfare in the form of the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump was promised that this would go like Venezuela, where if you chop off the head, the rest of the body falls in line. It did not work like that. The IRGC is different. And
well, that didn't happen in Venezuela either.
Well, he was pitched that it would work.
Delcy is still a continuation of the Maduro
The regime
apparatus.
didn't change in Venezuela, but at least he was able to get out of it cleanly after Maduro was captured.
Well,
in this case, it's very different.
Right. It was a strategic, targeted operation versus this was a, I mean, I think it's really hard.
Venezuela.
Yeah, he was sold on the idea that he would be able to topple the regime very quickly and that the people of Iran would rally around the United States and they would take back their government, as he said, on February 28th when he gave that press conference. And the reality is that Iran's playbook is to run down the clock. It's to continue to string this out. It is in their interest.
So, Elsie, you were just talking about the problems that Democrats have with masculinity and how they're portrayed. I mean, do you think that that's why Republicans are going down this route, and will it work?
Well, absolutely, this is why they're going down this path. It's just the messengers. I just can't. It's just
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz talking about masculinity. I mean, I'm gay, right? If you talk smack about my husband, you probably got some issues with me, and I'm not going to be easy about it. He rolled over pretty easy. politically speaking. And I'm just
When
like,
Trump attacked
when
his
Trump attacked his wife,
yeah.
and he attacked his family, and he attacked his character, and there he is, still right there. And so I'm looking at him, it's like my definition of masculinity has a lot to do with what's on the inside. Integrity, things like honesty, civic duty, a sense of something greater than yourself,
Not
a
fleeing
provider,
Texas to go to the Four Seasons Cancun.
not leaving your dog behind as you do that.
And then blaming your teenage daughter.
So
Don't leave the
when I
dog
think about
behind.
masculinity, I think, trying not to cheat on your wife. And if you do, you apologize and not cheat on a second. And if you do apologize, not, so those are the things that I consider masculine as a gay person. But as I said, I'm gay, so maybe I don't know. Maybe masculine means something else.
Any of the straight guys at the table.
Yeah.
Well, no, I agree. My definition of masculinity definitely precludes people who shill for somebody that offended their wife, as you said. It definitely precludes people who dipped out of their own state in order to avoid a natural disaster. Definitely precludes people who cheat on their wife with a porn star or cheat on their wife overall, like Ken Paxton. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's honesty. It's civic duty. It's the ability to be genuine and to care about those around you. Masculinity isn't sending endless dollars overseas while refusing to take care of the people that voted for you. That's to Ted Cruz and to Donald Trump. And one more thing, these AI ads need to be banned. I think that AI is the best thing to happen to the Republican Party because they now can create fake information to substantiate the fake information that they spew.
They're
Trump
hilarious,
sends
and they're very effective with voters.
Well,
So-
I think you're onto
sounds like
something on the
censorship.
AI
It's not
ads. Like
censorship.
I think these types of ads in particular, Republicans have to be really careful because they will backfire, and Democrats can do the same thing to Republicans. And I think there has to be some type of regulation when it comes to something like this. I mean, that is clearly false, and
But here's the thing.
propaganda.
It's not hard to tell that it's.
Well,
AI
I tell that to my old great grandpa or whatever. It's hard.
It's obviously.
It's
they're
hard.
targeting-
It's
You
hard.
know that, but is it obvious
They
to
are
the average
targeting
person?
boomers in
But I
Texas.
just say I agree that I just don't know how effective they are because the
mean-
idea. We were told that Spencer Pratt was going to win the LA mayor's race off a couple of AI videos, and that turned out to
I
not
say
be true.
Democrats
Yeah,
don't have to
but-
create the AI videos because we can just say, look at Ken Paxton who cheated on his wife.
I think Graham Plattner is going to have a wave to overcome, and I don't know if there's more coming out, but if there is, he's going to have to brace for that.
There probably is more coming out, don't you think, Adam?
There could be, but we are now witnessing the post-cancellation, post-purity style of politics that the Republican Party has ushered in. I'm not going to sit here and defend things Graham Plattner did in his past. Not even Graham Plattner defends these things that he did in his past. But we have watched for a decade as Republicans have repeatedly lowered the threshold, lowered the standards for their candidates. And now Democrats are going to keep holding our candidates to an infinitely higher standard while we have Ken Paxton in Texas, while we have Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office right now. And I guess it remains to be seen, but I also want to
Is it a high standard or is it a low standard?
Listen,
because I'm not sure that he's being held to a higher standard than anybody else.
Well, but the Republican
I mean-
Party is absolutely holding him to a higher standard than they hold their own candidates. I mean, Donald Trump had a sit-down dinner with Nick Fuentes, and the very same people who were silent about that are now clutching their pearls about this admittedly weird tattoo that Graham Plattner has apologized
And
for.
it's
the same
a Nazi
Republican-
tattoo,
Yeah.
Adam.
Yeah, I'm not-
Acknowledge that. It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
weird. It's a Nazi tattoo.
It's awful, yeah.
So I mean, look, Democrats now are. I hear what you're saying, and I know we've had conversations with you, Caroline, about similar things, but basically Democrats are saying that we're going to go lower. They go low, we go just as low.
I think that Democrats are trying to reframe this away from Graham Plattner's personality and towards a race between Graham Plattner versus Susan Collins. Susan Collins is somebody who rubber stamps all of Donald Trump's worst impulses, from stripping health care away from tens of millions of Americans that will lead to death. We talked about the affordability issues. We talked about ICE even. I mean, Susan Collins rubber-stamped Kristi Noem, which led to the death of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. So I'm not going to sit here and judge Mainers who want to push against the status quo. It's not my place to judge. If Graham Plattner can earn their trust, then he earns their trust.
But I think what's missing in the analysis here is that Graham Plattner just won a Democrat primary by running on the best aspects of President Trump's 2024 campaign platform. If you look at Graham Plattner's platform, he ran on no foreign intervention in the Middle East, no new wars. He ran on D.C. has been working for the elites and it has stopped working for the working class, which is very similar to President Trump's original drain the swamp message. He ran on bringing back U.S. manufacturing, working class issues. He's an anti-establishment working class
That's Bernie
candidate.
Sanders.
And
That's the Democratic Party.
Here's what you guys are missing.
She is making an important point.
He ran on
which
that,
is
and that's what he won.
This is,
Trump
this
failed
is
to
a
deliver.
version of the type of politics, of a type of populism on the left that Trump ran. At least he ran on it on the right. I'm not sure we could argue he governed quite that
I
way,
think
but he
this
ran
is-
on it.
My gut tells me this is a byproduct of the wrapping of the messenger as much as it is the message itself. He looks like a dude. Let's just say what it is. He's got the scruff. He's got the edge. At a moment in which Democrats were...
I actually would say
No,
that
it's the politics.
I don't think it's that.
Because he's a fraud.
Allow me to finish, though. Allow me to finish, because it's actually the Democrats who did this whole autopsy
Yeah.
on what it is to be masculine.
Did you guys? Did you
Right,
ever
right.
notice that?
They did it.
I've never seen it.
Allow
Let me let LZ to finish.
It's the Democrats that did this whole analysis about what it means to be masculine. They didn't do that because there wasn't a problem there. They didn't do that because there wasn't something that was happening on the right that they couldn't tap into. When I look at Graham Plattner, the first thing I think of, he looks like a dude. And he looks like someone who looks very different than many of the men who lead the Democratic Party. And I think that is an appealing aspect that Democrats need to talk about.
Let's start with the Iran piece, because this is genuinely significant. Adam Mockler made a point that should be getting a lot more attention. There's now a group of people who left the MAGA movement specifically because of this war. Not because they suddenly became progressives, but because Trump promised at his second inauguration that America would be judged not just by the war as it wins or ends, but by the war as it never starts in the first place. And then we got exactly that kind of war. What really gets me is the human cost being glossed over here. We've had KC-13-5s go down in American combat for the first time ever. We've had F-15 pilots go down over Iran that we still haven't heard from. While astronauts get White House visits and these pilots get silence, that's not a small detail. That's the kind of thing that should be front and center in every conversation about this conflict, and instead it's buried. And then there's the international perspective, which I think a lot of people aren't hearing enough about. Mockler talked about being in Istanbul, a NATO ally that literally shares a border with Iran, and asking people there directly whether this war makes them respect America more or less as a global force for good. The answer was unanimous. No. People pointed to the deaths of 165 school children and said, this isn't bringing anyone closer to peace, and it's not improving how America is viewed abroad. When your closest allies are telling you this, that's not noise you can dismiss. The timeline issue is its own scandal. We were told 4 to 6 weeks. We're past 100 days now. $100 billion spent. 0 political concessions on the nuclear question, 0 on the IRGC, 0 on regime change. Meanwhile, Americans are dealing with high gas prices and being told on television that this war is almost over. That gap between what's being said publicly and what's actually happening is exactly the kind of thing that erodes trust, and it should. And there's a pattern here that should worry everyone. Every time the US gets involved in a country that starts with IRR, it ends in the same way. Minimal progress, a grinding situation that drags on far longer than promised. And now Iran, waging this asymmetric pressure campaign around the Strait of Hormuz. Trump was reportedly sold on the idea that this would play out like Venezuela, that toppling leadership would cause everything else to fall into line. It didn't even fully work that way in Venezuela. And Iran's leadership and the IRGC are an entirely different structure. Iran's whole strategy from the start has been to run the clock, because they know American presidents face elections and rising domestic pressure the longer a conflict drags on. And that pressure is already showing up in the form of higher energy prices, higher fertilizer costs hitting farmers in places like Iowa, and grocery prices that eventually reflect all of it. Now let's get to the masculinity conversation, because this is where things got really sharp. Republicans have spent years trying to frame political toughness and masculinity as their exclusive territory. And then you have someone like Ted Cruz lecturing anyone about masculinity. Mockler, speaking as a gay man, made the point beautifully. If you talk badly about his husband, you're going to deal with him directly. But Ted Cruz When Trump went after his wife, after his family, after his character, Cruz folded almost instantly and has been standing right next to him ever since. That's not toughness. That's the opposite of it. And the definition of masculinity that actually got laid out at that table is the one that matters. Honesty, integrity, civic duty, not cheating on your wife, and if you do, not doing it again, and actually taking accountability, not abandoning your state during a natural disaster to go on vacation, not blaming your own teenage daughter for your mistakes, not sending endless amounts of money overseas while ignoring the people who voted for you back home. That's a real definition of masculinity. And it's one that a lot of the people currently waving that word around as a political weapon could not meet on their best day on. Then there's the AI-generated content issue. And this needs to be a bipartisan concern because it's not theoretical anymore. We're already seeing deepfake political ads being used to manipulate election outcomes. And the scary part is how convincing they're getting. Older voters in particular are going to struggle to tell the difference between real footage and AI-generated content. And traditional fact-checking simply cannot keep pace with how fast this stuff spreads. And here's the thing. If one side benefits from this today, the other side will absolutely use the same tools tomorrow. Without real disclosure requirements and regulation, every election going forward becomes a contest of who can generate the most convincing fake content, rather than who has the better ideas. And on the Grand Platinum discussion, Adam made the point that needs to be said over and over. The double standard here is glaring. Donald Trump sat down for dinner with Nick Fuentes, and the same people who said absolutely nothing about that are now clutching their pearls over a tattoo Plattner has already apologized for and addressed directly. Meanwhile, you've got Susan Collins, who has rubber-stamped policy after policy that strips healthcare away from millions of people, enabled ICE actions that have led to deaths, and consistently sided with this administration's worst impulses. But somehow, she's getting a pass while Plattner gets put under a microscope. That's not about consistent standards. That's about which candidates are politically convenient to attack. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification. I'll see you in the next one.